Good afternoon to you. Well, there's been some reporting this week about a problem with the management of planes and airliners and how pilots communicate with air traffic control on the ground. It's understood there was a problem with what's called the controller-pilot data link communications, which at one point seemed to mean that there was no proper controller in charge of the airspace of the Indian Ocean heading south towards the Antarctic for a whole day a week ago. Desmond Latham is the person who's been looking at this. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Frayintermedia. Desmond, good afternoon to you. What is this communication system and what happened to it?
Hello, Stephen, and hello, everyone. It's called a CPDLC, as you say, and basically it's part of a redundancy system that air traffic control operates, and it's not just south into Antarctic, it's halfway to Australia and pretty much halfway to South America. It's an extensive area of ocean, one of the biggest oceanic areas. Each country that abuts on an ocean through ICAO has a need to operate search and rescue obviously in the space that abuts on their countries if they have a large coast, and we're one of those. So that's in essence what it was. And the controller pilot data link really just sends like SMS. It looks like SMS notes through a text space, and it pops up on the control in the flight deck on the computer. And so it really deals with flight separation, altitude, speed, and those kind of things. And then all the pilot does is reply, either can radio back or just hits a button that says enable or unable. If they're able to conform to it, the message goes back on this data link, which functions through satellites. And the ATC and the other sides know that the plane has heard them and will be flying at a certain level. Because, of course, way out over the ocean, there's no radar. So operators need to have a computerized system as well as reporting from the planes to know exactly where the planes are so that they don't strike each other. But that's part of a redundancy system. In other words, there's a second high-frequency radio which operates at the same time. The problem last week is both were out, were not functioning.
Desmond, I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment. There's breaking news on our screen now, and confirmation in just the last few minutes, that the CEO, the group CEO of Eskom, Andre de Ruyter, has now quit his job, that he has resigned, we understand, from his position. Now, we are expecting formal confirmation from Eskom of this, but we understand now that Andre de Ruyter has resigned, called it quits, as you can see on his screen, from his position as the group CEO at the energy utility Eskom. You know, of course, the context to this. We have been on stage 5 load shedding since Saturday morning. There's been no official confirmation from Eskom, literally, since that last message on Saturday morning about this. You know, the situation involving our power stations at the moment, how much of those power stations, how much of that generating capacity is not available. You'll also, of course, know of the many calls for de Ruyter to resign, and indeed the gestures of support, and the comments from the Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, last week, that he believed that stage 6 load shedding was akin to agitating for the overthrow of the state. We'll have a lot more reaction to this story. We'll have a lot more understanding and analysis of the story as well. Either way, you know as well as I do, when we're on stage 5 load shedding and the person in charge of the system resigns, well, it does mean that we might well be in for a rough ride. Let's see how it plays out. All right, Desmond Latham, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's go back to our conversation around flight systems. If the communication system between pilots and the ground doesn't work, what does that mean? How dangerous is that?
Well, there is another backup. Of course, there are two others. One is satellite phones that each operator over the long distance over the ocean carries. So Qantas and so on have SATCOM. They have a satellite phone, so they can actually make phone calls. And then there's a fourth, which is that planes separate each other. So when we are flying over areas that are not controlled by ATC, which happens over Africa, for example, planes report their position to each other, so they know the altitude and their speed and when they're going to pass. And then, of course, there's a rule that planes flying in the east or the westward direction, that if you're flying in opposite directions, you don't strike each other head on. So there's a number of things in place that keep it safe. The point of high-frequency radio, if you run into a problem, you can't wait to dial a phone number and then tell somebody your problem. On an aeroplane, you merely report Mayday or pan, 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 which is that is a Mayday, but indicates you're in some serious trouble. But if you're making phone calls, you've got to wait for the call to connect. I don't know if you've used sat phones, but it takes minutes to do this, and you don't have minutes when you're running into a crisis in the aviation. So it's a situation that's not acceptable, really.
One system, as I understand it, hasn't been working for quite a few months. I mean, how can a system like this not be working for a few months?
We asked Air Traffic Navigation Services about this question last week and this week, and there's an investigation ongoing now that we hope to hear from the officials involved there about exactly why the high-frequency radio went out in November at least, and it's out for a couple of months apparently. We haven't heard back what the reason for that is, and secondly, what the reason for the data link outage either. So the controller pilot data link is part of this redundancy system I spoke about. So we're waiting, hopefully, to hear what happened here. The problem for us is that we are an ICAO signatory, the World Aviation Body that relies on us to respond to aircraft or any helicopters or anything that's over our oceanic space, to rescue them or to do something about it. So not having capacity to talk to these planes is, it's to be...
I seem to have lost Desmond Latham there. Unfortunately, our aviation expert, just talking about the situation there now.